We have formed the council.
Good evening, everyone.
Board of Works.
We're going to begin our the September 14th Lebanon City Council meeting.
They can approve the installation, but they don't approve it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 14th Lebanon City Council meeting. Our first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Lewis, please.
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now we'll move on to the roll call members. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mike Kincaid.
Present.
Keith Campbell.
Here.
Dick Robertson.
Here.
John Copeland.
Here.
Brent Wheat.
Here.
Sierra Messenger. Boris Jones.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to the approval of minutes from our previous meeting. Are there any changes to the proposed minutes?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
We've motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Our minutes are approved. We do have some visitors tonight from the library. Do I have consent from council to move to new business? Consent? Okay. All right, we'll come up with, so I'd invite Bo Cunningham from the Lebanon Public Library. I guess a couple things have changed here in Indiana law, and so we're doing a new thing tonight called a declaration of a fiscal body. So essentially I'll turn it over to Bo to kind of explain what we're doing here tonight, and it should be fairly quick, but go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, the declaration of the fiscal body just says who we come to as far as our budget is concerned. If it goes into binding review, if it's over that, help me out, Ryan, if it's over that 150%.
Yes.
We're not, so we don't go to binding review, but if we were to go over the average growth quotient in our budget request, it would go to binding review, which we don't. So we're going to try to make this as easy as possible for you, but it's just a form that we have to fill out and send back, and a form that you acknowledge that you're the fiscal body.
Okay.
And then I can move on to the resolution if you'd like me to as well.
Yeah, sure. So let me explain. So you should have all received the declaration of fiscal body. So essentially it's for similar to the process what the county council does, where essentially they acknowledge the budget of the kind of, essentially it's an underlying taxing unit. So we don't still have any authority over it, but it's just kind of, I guess they've changed state law that instead of it going to the county council, kind of the city council of where you're located. So that's why they're here tonight. So yeah, go ahead and move on to the resolution if you'd, and we'll kind of address those all right there at the end. Yep.
Yeah, I'm here tonight to ask for the City Council's blessing. The library is looking to do a general obligation bond. Our current bond is about to fall off, and as best practice, we want to keep that going. We've worked with an architect to find some needs in the building, and we definitely have several that we need to address over at the library. Our roof is one. It's about, it's only got a few years left of viability. We've been patching and patching, but we'd like to get that roof repaired. Gutter work is also something. So we're really looking at this bond for the exterior of the building, parking lots to be repaved, the marquee out front to do a little work on that. So we're looking at doing a small bond, and I also have Ryan Fetters here from Baker Tilly. He's the brains behind the numbers, so I'm going to let him describe the numbers to you real quick.
Thank you very much. Good evening, I'm Ryan Fetters. I'm with Baker Tilly, I'm a municipal advisor to the library. I think you may all have a presentation that looks like this. I'm just going to take a very high 30,000 foot view of this. The library would like to issue $1.7 million of general obligation bonds, and that would be repaid over 4 years. There would be no tax increase with this. In fact, what they're going to do is there's going to be a forced spend down next year in 2021. So they will use a portion of the balance in their debt service fund to make the payment on the new bonds. And so once the older bonds roll off, then they will start levying for that bond. And so there will actually be a slight decrease in the tax rate next year, but they're going to stay right at the level where they are. And it's a function of the budgeting and the way the DLGF budgets the debt service. But there will not be a tax rate increase. And so in fact, this last page actually shows this. So the graph here in the light blue, right here, this is the existing debt service in the columns that has been paid already. The darker blue are the payments for 2020. So we have one more payment this year. 2021, they'll have 2 payments on the existing debt, and then they'll have 2 payments, which is at that sort of green barbershop bit of the bar at the top. That'll be paid out of the debt service fund, so will not be levied for. And what you can see is the the yellow line here is the debt service levy. The brown line represents the tax rate. So you can see right now in 2020, we're at about 5.47 cents. We're going to dip a little bit in 2021 to about 4.9 cents. And then we'd be back up to no more than the 5.47 cents in 2022. Where that money and how it's represented being paid is this orange line, where you can see it drops right here from 2020 to 2021. It's because we're spending down the cash balance and the debt service fund to make that little green payment up at the top of 2021, as opposed to levying for it. Does that make sense?
Yep. So any questions from council concerning the finances or for Bo?
No, but this is a formality. It goes in front of the county council, then in front of the city council.
No, this just goes in front of the city council.
Yeah, so the declaration of fiscal body, so we're talking about two separate things. So we'll actually have a resolution at our next meeting. So there's miscommunication, we need to get that out for tonight, but I wanted to have you guys have the actual information. So we'll actually have a resolution at the next meeting. Essentially, we're acknowledging that they've kind of come to us and presented the financial information to us for the bond issuance. But then the declaration of fiscal body is kind of is it an annual review now going forward?
I don't know if it's annual. This is the first time I've seen it, but because
Right.
new law was written.
Okay,
we have to.
so essentially that, instead of going to the county council, they now come to us. So that's just a kind of an acknowledgement for their 2020 budget, not for the bond issuance, if that makes sense.
So the law was changed for them to come in front of the city council.
Correct.
Because they're within the city limit
I believe so, yeah.
versus the county council,
Which would
if they happen to be outside the city limit.
Yes,
I'm
there were specific rules, and I don't know if I have
There's
those.
two different issues going on. What I'm
Yeah.
referring to in the bonds is a separate statute.
Yeah.
And because of that, right. So what we have to determine is based on the number of parcels within the library district, within Lebanon, versus outside the city, within the township. So if there's a balance the balance is greater within the city, they come ahead or to the
Okay.
city council for approval for the bond. If there were more parcels outside the city within the library district, they would have to go to the county council. But in fact, the balance is within the city limits.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're doing.
I just want to understand the logic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can talk about, if I can, that's the law.
No, I do now.
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, and essentially because you guys issued a bond, was it 20 years ago? Or was
Yeah.
that, because that essentially was for the construction of the library that
Right,
now,
that's
right?
the
And so
one
that's the
talking
bond that's rolling off. And so that's
Alright.
what we're talking about, so. Okay. So again, like you'll have the actual resolution that we'll take action on at our next meeting, but that's why you have all the information when you guys are reading that, so. Any further questions or concerns for Bo while they're here?
No, sir.
Okay, then essentially so I have the declaration of the fiscal body in front of me here. So essentially all we need is the council motion to essentially acknowledge. Actually, Rob, you want to read the declaration of the fiscal body? And then we'll essentially acknowledge it's been presented to us.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, this is the declaration of fiscal body for the Lebanon Public Library as indicated in, whereas library officials typically submit the library's annual budget for non-binding review by a separate fiscal body pursuant to Indiana Code. Under certain conditions designated in the code, the library's budget is subject to binding review and adoption by a separate fiscal body. This report identifies the fiscal body that would do any binding budget adoption in the event such binding adoption is required under the provisions of Indiana law. In the case of a triggering event under Indiana law which requires the library to submit its budget to a separate fiscal body for binding budget adoption, the fiscal body that is responsible for that binding adoption is this Lebanon City Council. The library board president signed and dated this, that it was adopted, and then this fiscal body would acknowledge the same.
Okay. Do we have a motion to acknowledge the declaration of the fiscal body from the library board?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so it's the first time, we'll get better at that in the future. Clear it all for. Okay, thank you, Bo. And like I said, we'll actually have the vote on the resolution at our next meeting, so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes what I have for new business, so consent to go back to old business now? Consent? Okay. All right, this is ordinance 2020-08. From my understanding, and I apologize, I was absent from the last meeting. I had unfortunately, my grandfather passed away, and I was unable to attend due to that. So from my understanding, you guys put ordinance 2020-08 on the table. So I would need a motion to bring ordinance 2020-08 off the table. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we take 2020-08 off the table.
Okay, we have motions. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, ordinance 2020-08 is now back on the table and is open for discussion. Kevin, I want you to, I know we talked about this kind of before, and before we get too far into this, I think we've already talked about making some changes to this ordinance. We are removing, or we would like to propose to remove section, or item D under section 2. That will essentially remove the engineer approval from that ordinance. And then also, from my understanding, there may be some discussion concerning item C. So is there any comments or discussion from council? This is concerning the Elm Swamp and Gulfside Drive three-way stop. And Kevin, if you want to touch on that first, then we can kind of have the council discussion on whether that stays or goes.
Absolutely. We heard your comments at the last meeting. We also heard comments from Board of Works. We've also heard some public comment regarding this request. I guess first and foremost, the easy one is we put on there that this would become a more administrative process that would be done based on city engineer recommendation and ratified by the Board of Public Works and Safety. We understand there were some concerns there as the elected official body wanting to have some oversight in this process, so we have removed that item D from the list that would give that authority to the city engineer and the Board of Works. So that is removed. It will continue to be an ordinance level discussion with city council. The other thing we heard a lot about was the intersection with Gulfside and Elm Swamp. Things went both ways, but it seemed like we had more people on the side of, that at least proved to us that there is a warrant there, because we're not comfortable of adding an additional stop on that street. At the time of the last meeting, we had done the traffic counts, but unfortunately, due to some computer errors, we weren't able to get access to the data. So that has now been corrected. We did not have to recount. We just had to, our folks at the street department and our IT department help us retrieve that data. We were able to recover it all and do the analysis. I'm also happy to report that not only are you depending on me to review that analysis, we also sent this out to a third-party engineer to get their opinion on it as well. So we want to make sure we were dotting our I's and crossing our T's. If there's no discussion on those topics at this point, I'm happy to go further into the analysis.
Yeah. Any discussion specifically about the three-way stop at Elm Swamp Road and Gulfside Drive? Or essentially, is there unanimous decision that we don't want that in the ordinance?
Nothing from me.
No.
We're going to go into the analysis of it, correct?
Well-
Of the findings, is that what you were said on?
Well, do we have specific findings just for the Gulfside?
We
and
do.
Can we talk about that then? Go
Yeah.
ahead.
In fact, let me give you an overview of what we did as we were analyzing this.
Yeah.
So we did a number of traffic counts, starting at the north end. So across the north end of the screen, the upper end of the screen is Anderson Lane, and this is Elm Swamp Road.
Can you zoom out, Kevin, on that?
As it exists, yes.
Yep, there you go.
So the green dots, it gets a little better, doesn't on color-wise as you zoom out. So the green dots represent where we counted. So you can see we counted northbound and southbound traffic between Gulfside and Anderson Lane. We also counted eastbound and westbound traffic on Gulfside Drive between Turnberry and Elm Swamp. Going further south, we counted between Gulfside and Elizaville, northbound and southbound on Elm Swamp. Continuing further south, we counted on Elizaville Road between Grant Boulevard and Elm Swamp, both eastbound and westbound. And then last but certainly not least, we also counted northbound and southbound between Grant Street and Elizaville. So we did counts in all 5 of those locations to look at the traffic data. We also counted speed of those passing cars as well. So when you get into stop sign warrant analysis based on the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, you look at a lot of different things, and there's a lot of criteria that you can base your decision on. One of those, and probably the most solid method, is looking at traffic volumes, traffic counts. So, again, we'll look at the data here. This is for Elizaville and Elm Swamp. When you look at the criteria that you're trying to establish, it is 300 cars per hour in either direction on the major street and 200 cars per hour in either direction on the minor street for an 8-hour window in common. So we have to have those 500 cars passing through the intersection for 8 hours in a row. We don't have that. I will tell you right now, we don't have that at either intersection. But there's more to the warrant analysis to talk about. But just looking at the traffic data, this is the traffic data for Elizaville Road and Elm Swamp. Again, Elm Swamp is on the left and Elizaville is on the right. And so you can see I've highlighted in yellow there where the major street traffic counts get to over 300, but I also included a couple that were near 300. Because the reality is, due to COVID, our high school enrollment is essentially cut in half, the amount of people going to the high school and the middle school, so that would affect traffic volume. So the numbers would be slightly higher, but not so extreme that they would completely distort these numbers. But the real telling factor is looking at Elizaville, we never meet the 200 cars per hour in any given hour going east and west. East to west in combination, adding together, we never meet that. So we never have any hours of the required 8 where that criteria is met. When we look at the intersection of Elm Swamp and Gulfside, the story is very similar. The traffic volumes on Elm Swamp are again highlighted in yellow. You know, I highlighted anything that got close to 300, but there is, as you would expect, there's not a lot of traffic on Gulfside. So again, reaching that 800 or 500 cars per hour in the intersection for an 8-hour period, the warrant just isn't there. Now, there's other things you can look at when determining warrant. One would be traffic accidents or traffic crashes. We no longer call them accidents because someone is always at fault. So the proper term that we use in the engineering world is crash. So looking at crash data, you have to have 5 or more in the intersection in a 12-month period that would be improved if you added a stop sign. So if 5 people hit a deer in the intersection, it doesn't matter because obviously deer don't pay attention to stop signs. But if you could say if a stop sign was there, those 5 accidents in a given year could be prevented, then you can use traffic accidents or traffic crashes, to warrant the stop sign. We only had in a 3-year period 2 minor property damage accidents in the entire corridor between Elizaville and Gulfside. So we don't meet the accident criteria. Crash criteria. We used to say accidents. We no longer say accidents. The other criteria you can look at would be sight distance. So this is why my recommendation would be to look at and install a 3-way stop at the intersection of Elizaville and Elm Swamp. Because of the skewed nature of that intersection, it provides some limited sight distance capabilities. So you can also base it on that. You can also just override all those criteria as a city council and look to other decisions informing your ordinances. But in terms of warrant, we really can't base a stop sign and justify a stop sign at either intersection other than due to sight distance constraints associated with the intersection of Elizaville. So we've looked at that and how we might improve that. And what you see here is the intersection of Elizaville and Elm Swamp. Elizaville is going off in this direction, Elm Swamp is this way. I guess for clarity purposes, I might, there we go. So that way north is up on your screen. What I'd really like to do is square up the approach leg from Elizaville into that intersection and remove some of this miscellaneous pavement on the southeast corner of the intersection that is really not needed and really causes people to go too fast to the northeast from Elm Swamp to Elizaville. So we'd like to square that up. We'd like to minimize the amount of pavement that's used for driving in that area. And then we would like to create a three-way stop condition at this intersection, again, to help improve sight distance as people come up to the intersection.
It also significantly reduces the pedestrian crossing distance as well.
Yes, I didn't mention that, but when we talk about traffic volumes to meet the warrant, you can also add into your car, your vehicular traffic volume, pedestrian and bicycle volumes. We don't have a way of counting that, but just anecdotally, we're so far from the 500, people in the intersection, we're not going to get another 200 pedestrians going through there. And especially, we're not going to get to an 8-hour time period. But I will say that intersection is very difficult to cross in the north-south direction from a pedestrian standpoint. There's, I think, over 120 feet of pavement. That is a very long crosswalk. So we would like to restrict this. For this point, we would just be installing paint and some traffic delineators, similar to the intersection that we upgraded at Harney Elementary at the intersection of Garfield and Camp Street. So we'd be striping that to reduce the intersection, to square it up. We'd paint new stop bars, and we would also then install some of those traffic delineators, plastic traffic delineators, to restrict the traffic flow. We would also then monitor it for the better part of a year and make sure that we haven't restricted the pavement cross-section too much. And provided that we find that acceptable, then we would move forward with a bigger infrastructure package to modify the intersection and remove some of that pavement. This is just a couple of analysis that we did to just look at passing vehicles and what that might look like, and making sure that the lines that we are drawing in terms of the travel ways are going to fit for larger vehicles that might go through that intersection. These are like large delivery trucks is what those are. So, with your consideration, we have revised ordinance 2020-08 to include the cleanup of Lafayette Avenue and West Main Street, and to include a three-way stop at Elizaville and Elm Swamp. We're not going to forget about Gulfside and Elm Swamp. We are going to add additional signage to better notify motorists of the pedestrian crossing at that location. We're going to put one of those caution signs on the center line like we have going into the park and at the elementary schools. And we're also going to look at several locations around the city purchasing the pedestrian activated solar powered flashing beacons like we have at the Arc and at the Boys and Girls Club on West Main Street. So we're looking at doing those improvements as well at this crossing, as well as the other crossings into the park. We'll have those signage and those flashing beacons to help people get across the street and to alert motorists that there may be people crossing the street. Okay. So what questions can I answer for you about that?
Questions for Kevin?
Sure. That's a lot of work. Thank you very much for that.
Happy to do it.
From an engineering standpoint, that looks really good, but the warrant, the traffic count, there's not the count there. Number two, there's not enough crash numbers
I make the same mistake.
it create a problem, and walking, I walk that direction because I walk down to the shallow residence and cut through and go through Elmwood and back through Ulen. And it's a nice little walk, you know, crossing that street, but if there is a car there, people have no issues with waiting. So I don't see the need at this time to go through the expense or the effort to do this and put a stop there. I see it in the future when Auburn Meadows gets built out more and the traffic pattern change maybe because everything on 250 is built out on that end. But right now, I don't see a need for that.
Understood.
Further discussion? Comment? The reason, again, I'd like to speak to your point a little bit, and I understand what you're saying.
And I'll finish by saying that I do drive that 3 times a day.
And I will say, you know, the numbers don't lie. We don't meet the traffic volume warrant even on the intersection with Elmwood. The geometry of it is problematic, but we can correct that with the striping and the traffic delineators that I've suggested. We wouldn't necessarily have to make that a 3-way stop. Right now, it's all the traffic coming westbound on Elizaville is in a stop condition. The traffic coming southbound on Elm Swamp is stopped. The traffic northbound on Elm Swamp is free flow. So we could still modify the intersection geometry, and that's really not an ordinance level decision. That would be more of a staff decision, in my opinion. And we can make those corrections today. And we are already working on upgrading some of those crosswalks as we speak.
And the sidewalks do look good out there, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think once you modify the intersection to a true 90-degree intersection, I think it now seems counterintuitive that one leg of it doesn't have to stop. It makes a little more sense when one just veers off, you know, and that's the way it's evolved to today. But when you tighten it up to a 3-way intersection, I think the difficulty you have is that those people that are now stopped, waiting to turn left or right from Elizaville onto Elm Swamp, are probably going to assume the oncoming traffic is also stopping because you don't have that wide configuration of the intersection. My worry would be is if we just realign the intersection and didn't make it a 3-way stop, bless you, that we would see an issue with traffic accidents, traffic crashes, increasing in that intersection.
You know, no one ever knows that.
We never know.
We never know.
I can show you plenty of intersections that on paper look to be really dangerous around
Yeah.
the city, this being one of them, but the data doesn't lie.
You could start narrowing that up just a little bit at a time, you know, just to kind of move a couple feet over on that southbound, that northbound off of, Union Boulevard at that point, onto Elizaville Road. I mean, you can do things like that. But I've not heard anybody other than Matt. He lives out there, but there's no neighbors that have come forward and said they need something done at that intersection either, so.
I would say there's been a couple that have contacted me saying that they have supported it, but I would say it's not like been a super hot button issue.
Yeah, it's not an overwhelming response, but I would say the Facebook response that we've seen generally is in favor of the stops, especially at Elizaville. It's probably 50-50 at Gulfside. Not that we should base our policy decisions on Facebook posts, but it is interesting to see what the public is talking about.
Kevin, did the numbers justify a stop sign at Lafayette and Riley Road where you put a 3-way there?
The numbers were higher there. I don't believe, it's been a while since I looked at those, I believe we only got to 5 or 6 hours of traffic volumes increasing 500. We did not get all the way to 8 hours.
Yeah, so.
But that development that's down there on Riley Road.
That was
isn't
before that
done
too,
yet.
and that's strict,
Yeah.
well, yeah, and when we counted, it was before then as well, so they
And
might
the
be
ones
there
and the ones
today.
on Witt Road, they're not done. So, I mean, that was gonna be over.
The traffic volumes on Riley were much stronger, it's hard to even say which is the primary road, Lafayette or Riley Road. The geometry tends to lend towards Lafayette Avenue, but the traffic volumes would tell you they're basically equal, so.
What was Lafayette Road from 1960 to 1930?
Yes.
Lafayette Avenue.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was more traffic.
Any further discussion?
I have something. I forwarded a copy to Dick and to the mayor's office. Was reached out by some of the residents in the area. They do support the throughway stop, but the one thing that they said, at the least, would you consider the city painting crosswalks at the intersections of Elizaville, Elm Swamp intersection, and Elizaville Grant Street intersection? They're talking about, the people I talked to had elementary, middle school, and high school kids using that area, bikes, walking, jogging, things like that, and they were concerned, safety concern, with kids getting out of school at certain times, walking that area, and the traffic, at least going northbound.
Sure.
Not slowing down enough for the kids could cross and things like that. So, again, I was reached out to, and I just want to bring it up to the board tonight, that was some of the suggestions from the community that live in that area.
Yeah. I will say we are actively remarking crosswalks throughout the city right now, and those crosswalks are on the street department's priority list. So regardless of the decision on 2020-08, we will move forward with remarking those crosswalks.
Okay.
As well as signing the crosswalk at Gulfside.
Okay.
Any further discussion from council?
I would just like to add that I'm with Mike a little bit. I know that the warrants are not there, okay? Sure. But I've spent a lot of years going through that intersection, and I've seen a lot of cars going, and I know we don't use, I've said this before, you're not supposed to use stop signs for speed control, but I've seen a lot of cars go around that curve, Elizaville Road, at a pretty good pace, because once you come down that hill, you think, I'm not going to stop until I get to Elizaville. So I've seen a lot of cars going pretty fast down around through there. I think being as we have a crosswalk there, I really do believe by making the changes that you're suggesting, I think that automatically makes it a three-way stop. And I would still encourage a three-way stop at that intersection for the future. We've got, what's that addition on Autumn Farms or something up there? Or
Auburn Meadows.
Auburn Meadows. We got that growing up there, which means there's going to be more kids someday, and someday a sidewalk going all the way up to there to get those people an access to the schools and things like that as well. And I would support the three-way at Elm Swamp Road and Elizaville Road.
I think what you said is
I support
really-
the idea of a either crosswalk sign or lights or whatever. I do know when we put the marker out there in front of the road and you see the crosswalk signs there, like for Gulfside and Elm Swamp, I know, I go down through Main Street and I don't know, there's times I'm stopping at Boys and Girls Club, and there's nobody there, but it's, you just get used to slowing down. A comment was made in the Board of Works meeting earlier that traffic is running faster down through there. Well, as some of us know, when you pave the road and it's smoother, people drive faster. And that happens all the time. And so I know that's a problem. So, but once I think you put the crosswalk signs and people see that and know it's there, I think you'll see a lot of people slowing down a little more, trying to pay attention, at least looking for people that are walking anyway.
Right.
So I don't think it warrants a stop sign there yet.
I think when you're looking at the way you're doing the delineators, I think you call them those things that go up, I think that can cause confusions for some of our younger people. They think there's a protection there, in which there's not, so I would support a stop there. I think that would take away the confusion in addition to the crosswalk. even as an adult, sometimes I'm not quite sure what to do with those.
Yeah.
But especially on a curve, I think they'd give a false sense of security if there wasn't a stop there.
That's a good point. Ultimately, the best thing to do would be to protect the pedestrians with the curb, and just like at Garfield and West Camp Street, we've had those up for a little over a year. We are actually planning this fall to take those out and install a curb. We feel like they've performed well. People are staying off of them. People have gotten used to the intersection. So we're confident enough that we can take out some of that excess pavement and tighten up that intersection with some curbs. And ultimately, that would be my goal here. So let's do that to get people used to the new traffic patterns. And then, next summer, let's talk about spending some of our money to actually make these permanent improvements that are fully protecting the pedestrians.
Any further discussion from council?
No, sir.
Any public comment concerning this issue? Okay. So my thought is to entertain a motion to amend ordinance 2020-08. I know it technically already is, but I want to make sure we have, that way I want to make sure it's clear to everybody that what was originally proposed is being pulled out. So if we want to remove the three-way stop at Elm Swamp Road and Gulfside, as well as essentially the delegation to the city engineer on where to put stop signs, we would need a motion to remove items C and D from section 2 of ordinance 2020-08. So would anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make a move to amend ordinance number 2020-8, removing sections 2C Charlie and 2D David.
Okay. Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, section 2 has been amended, removing items C and D. So, Rob, can you read ordinance 2020-08 on first reading, please?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Ordinance 2020-08 concerns an amendment to Chapter 76 traffic schedules. Pursuant to Indiana Code, it provides for a municipality to regulate motor vehicle traffic within its corporate boundaries. This city council has jurisdiction over the public thoroughfares and streets within the corporate boundaries of the city, and this council believes it's in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare to amend Chapter 76 traffic schedules. Therefore, as the effective date of this ordinance, Chapter 76, Schedule 5, stop intersections of the City Code of Ordinance shall be amended to include the following: A, Lafayette Avenue and West Main Street, a three-way stop. B, Elizaville Road and Elm Swamp Road, a three-way stop. And the remaining provisions of Chapter 76 of the City Code are not affected by this ordinance.
Okay. Ordinance 2020-08 has been read on first reading. I know we've had this in front of us for a while, just based on the way the meetings have met. Is there unanimous consent to suspend the rules and move to second reading, or would you like to take this up at our next meeting?
Do what, yeah?
Unanimous consent to suspend the rules and move to second reading on ordinance 2020-08?
Nothing's going to change in between now and then, is it?
That's my thought is, yep.
Make the motion.
Unless we decide not to do the Leisville Road three-way stop.
Well, and that's, it's already been removed, right? Or, so it's in there now.
Okay,
So then
all
it's,
right.
now we vote on the merits of the ordinance, so to
Okay.
speak, so. Okay, so, motion to suspend the rules?
Yes.
We have a motion to suspend the rules, and I need unanimous consent on this. Do we have unanimous consent? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, rules are currently suspended, and we are moving ordinance 2020-08 to second reading. We just read the ordinance on first reading, so at this time, any further discussion concerning ordinance 2020-08 on second reading? Any public comment now? Okay, then I would entertain a motion concerning ordinance 2020-08.
I move we adopt ordinance 2020-08.
We have a motion to adopt and a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Ordinance 2020-08 is adopted. Thank you, council.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And Mike, your comments are well taken as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
That concludes what I have for old business, and we already completed new business. So is there anything else from council discussion or announcements?
No, sir.
Okay, move on to claims
I got
then.
one thing for Kevin.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, Kevin, I could have told you after the meeting. Going back to the sidewalks and the area we're talking about, we might look at considering a sidewalk from Chadwick Addition, where Grant Street comes out to Liesville Road there in Chadwick,
Yes,
to Elm Swamp Road on the north side. I just happened to be there one day, and a guy's running along the sidewalk out of Chadwick, and he turns or walking, and then he's walking in the grass
Yeah.
all the way to there, and I thought, well, if we had a sidewalk down to there, that would tie into that intersection.
I would agree.
you know?
I'll
So,
have,
Might look at it.
we'll look at our active living program and see if
Yeah.
that's something that, I don't believe we've got the money left this year to get that into the budget.
Next year or
So
something.
we can look at
Just
adding
think you ought to
that program
consider it,
next
yeah.
year. And that would be a key critical gap in the sidewalk network. Now, I will say there are sidewalks in Chadwick
I know that.
that go behind houses.
Yeah.
And I believe there is one sidewalk network that actually does connect to the sidewalk out
Yeah.
along Elm
Yeah.
Swamp. But obviously, it doesn't follow Elizabeth Road.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay.
Any further announcements or discussion? Okay. Would entertain a motion concerning the claims.
Make a motion, we play claims?
With motion to pay the claims, is there a second? Motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Claims are approved. And we entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Our next city council meeting will be Monday, September 28th at 7:15 PM. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.